the results of some of our activities focused on disinformation in the recent years. I don't know how close it is to what you are dealing with, but actually I hope that this will bring an interesting insight into our work. I am project manager and researcher at the National Training Center, which is an organization focused on educational activities. In fact, we develop educational and training programs which aim at addressing various issues and deficiencies in the mainstream education. And one such an issue, definitely, not only for us, but for the rest of the countries, as far as we are aware, is the so-called information literacy of learners and educators, and more specifically, the skills to identify and counterfeit fake news and disinformation, which has turned into the so-called infodemy of the latest days. So I will start my presentation with a very brief introduction to the basis, the scientific base of our work, without going into detail, of course, because it's just the aim is just to be to keep it very popular. So if we are to trust the discoveries of neuroscience on how the human brain works, our human inclination to disinformation is simply inevitable. The main culprits are the amygdala, which modulates memories, and the prefrontal cortex, responsible for the abilities to differentiate among conflicting thoughts, to determine what is good and what is bad, what is same and what is different, and also it is responsible for working towards a defined goal, prediction of outcomes, and social control. Another important brain center, the actual hub of information flow from the senses, is the thalamus. On this slide, you can see to the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the depiction of the route along which information received as a result from emotional stimuli turns into emotional response within milliseconds. So this is probably the shortest possible introduction to the topic. On which are the responsible brain, which is the responsible brain infrastructure. So from it may be concluded that the target of disinformation are the cognitive shortcuts through which we process the newly received information. In our work on De facto, which is a project successfully completed and which dealt with disinformation, especially in educational context, we established 4 leading concepts borrowed from cognitive psychology and linguistics that explain a lot about the process of and the impact of disinformation. These 4 concepts reveal what we call the cognitive layer of disinformation. By raising the awareness of their existence, we may help people to be more protected against manipulation attempts. The first of those concepts is the idea of the so-called frames as thinking contexts. Actually, this term is borrowed, it was first introduced to scientific field by the British anthropologist Gregory Bateson, and further on developed by the cognitive scientist George Lakoff. And the idea behind is that people think in well-defined contexts known as frames. For example, if you think of the school as a frame, this frame contains textbooks, desks, whiteboard, teachers, students, you name it. These are all objects with a semantic role of their own, which dictates their expected behavior or function. Or, for example, if you look at the slide that I have prepared, this is a depiction of the newly established COVID-19 frame, which is so overwhelmingly powerful because of the scale of the pandemic affecting every aspect of today's living. Can you guess which of the pictures that you see fits the frame and which not? Our minds actually tend to evaluate objects, actions, and facts as being real or true when they correspond to the frame, and just the opposite as not being real or being false and fake when they do not fit into our cognitive frames. Frames are automatically invoked each time when a communication process refers to them, and the mind chooses the path of lesser resistance. new neuron connections are strengthened each time when we confirm a fact which already fits the established frame. These frames are different for each person. Even if I refer to the example I just gave you, the idea of school might be different from person to person. But this is why the evaluation of what is real and what is not is very subjective. And this explains why a single fact or information can be evaluated, perceived, or even recorded in a different manner and with a different connotation. You see what is the impact on the information flow of this concept that we have figured out. Frames are very, very slow to form and equally difficult to change, and sometimes they are even impossible to change. The second concept in our systematic framework is the so-called systemic causality. Normally, our brains deal very well with direct cause and effect relations. Such, for example, we expect that in the summertime it's going to be hot, in the wintertime the weather is rather cold. Well, nowadays it's a mess, but still, this is what our expectation is. Our brain puts together sequences of cause and effects which come from observable situations. The systemic causality is about things that cannot be observed as they are outside the direct sensory perception through our senses, eyesight, hearing, taste, olfaction, and touch. In reality, most of the information which is propagated through online media is not binary in nature, it is systemic, which means that we cannot say that this is true or false, or that it is about a yes or no or black and white. It is, this means that a single fact which we can observe and on which we can agree is indeed a result of complex cause and effect beyond our direct perception. I have selected an example to show you this. This is a headline from a Bulgarian newspaper, and the headline says, "Men escaped the quarantine of Bansko, found deaths." This is a good example of how a complex event is presented as direct cause and effect. It is from the early COVID-19 days when a small town in southwestern Bulgaria was the first to be locked down due to 3 cases of positive COVID tests. This happened in March last year. As you can see, the title strongly suggests a link between the illegal escape and the sudden death of the 60-year-old man, further implicating that it had to do with the new and mysterious virus. Later on, this casualty was proved to have had no relation to COVID-19 whatsoever. The third concept in our framework is known as motivated cognition. It reveals the important aspect in understanding how we perceive the world and why we tend to assign unrealistically high trust to information received by those who are close to us, as opposed to other people and members of other groups. Our goals or needs motivate our cognition. For example, our financial interests or our deeply inborn need for positive self-perception shape the way we evaluate facts and take decisions. Straightforward, another example. In situations when the goals are not clearly set and beliefs are still to be established, motivation could be easily used to manipulate. One such an example is the vaccination campaign featuring celebrities and politicians who received the anti-COVID-19 shot. You know that this is happening all over the world now, and we may take it as a positive or positive manipulation, or at least a campaign which is aiming at something good. It's not exactly the case with the next slide to show you. This is the notorious claim by former President Donald Trump that injecting UV light inside the body can kill COVID-19. You know that there was a series of claims like that, which caused some casualties in the United States. And again, the mechanism which triggered the reaction of people can be labeled as motivated cognition, because those people used their stances as very authoritative figures in society to influence other people's reactions. So the fourth and last of our concept within our theoretical framework is the so-called equivalence and emphasis. Equivalence refers to statements which are logically equivalent but phrased differently. Thus, The phrasing causes individuals to alter their preferences. By the way, this is very frequently used in the course of political elections, for example. With emphasis, people make different judgments depending on which aspect of a statement was intentionally emphasized by the provider of the information. Again, an example, this is the very famous and popular COVID-19 alert, which contains all the data, which is showed on daily basis. And it announces the daily rates of new cases, recoveries, and COVID casualties. There seems to be a correlation between the choice of which part of the data to announce first and the government's decisions on whether to tighten or release the restrictions on daily life. Of course, I'm driving on examples from Bulgaria, but I can tell you that now that we are after the peak of the so-called second wave, we have a significant drop of in numbers of the new cases. And now, since early January, our news are more focused on the number of recoveries, because they are used to explain to be explained as a positive outcome, a success of the imposed lockdown, because we are in the process of releasing some of the measures that were taken in late November, following as it shows on the picture, a number of more than 4,000 cases a day. So another example, which all of us remember because it happened only 1 year ago, in the early days of the pandemic, news outlets circulated colored maps of COVID-19 spread. And even if there was one single registered case, this would trigger coloring the entire country in red. And the maps quickly turned red when large land area countries were included. Now, if you compare it with the data that we have nowadays, you see that it seems a bit exaggerated and ridiculous. There is a very interesting research which you might be aware of by a social media activist group called Avaz, which was made in April 2020, and which says that on Facebook, the content from the top 10 websites spreading health misinformation generated almost 4 times as many views as equivalent content from the top 10 websites of leading health institutions. To make it shorter, it seems that official information is much less popular than the information which is spread from as fake information. All right. So why is this so? This is a matter of truth now that fake news travel further, faster, deeper, more broadly, because people, not computers, are those who tend to spread them. And that's why we are focusing on the cognitive aspects of this information, because at the end of the day, it is us who are responsible for all that situation. So there is another aspect that I would like to add to my presentation today, apart from those 4 main cognitive concepts. These are the so-called cognitive biases. Scientists know that human beings are consistently, routinely, and profoundly biased. But what is bias? That's the idea that that we all use shortcuts and rules of thumbs by which we make judgments and predictions. Actually, the first time this idea was introduced into science dates back to 1970s and is related to Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, very famous cognitive scientists. As of today, there is a huge list of biases, something like a long inventory of more or less known and well-described biases exceeding the number of 200. They correspond to different memory and cognitive issues, which define the way we perceive the world and react to its stimuli. For the purposes of my presentation, I obviously did not cover them all, but I have selected just a few to demonstrate their importance on communication and on the topics that we are all interested in. So my selection starts with 2 biases that go hand in hand. This is the proportionality bias. In fact, this means the belief that major events must have major causes that fuel the desire to find out the big plan behind the curtains. And the other thing that it is very closely related to is the so-called intentionality bias, which the simple explanation behind it is that events are definitely planned by someone. Just think of any of the conspiracy theories that we have all been targeted with in the recent months. By the way, all the new theories about COVID are not new at all. They are just some ideas that have been refurbished, but that have existed for quite a while. Like the one which claims that Bill Gates plans to use a vaccine to manipulate or alter human DNA, or which is closely related to the big plan behind mass vaccination campaign, and actually the reason for inventing COVID-19, which is to implant microchips to people in order to control them, to serve world elites, financial, and who knows what else interests. So the reason why these such theories become very, very popular is that they have a significant number of supporters who suffer from the so-called confirmation bias. I say suffer, but actually this is just a trait of our human brains. So we are all inclined to having it, because this means just the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms our own pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. Think about how often when you see the news feed, you just go for reading something that grabs your attention because you find it similar to what you already know, and it is just there to confirm your beliefs. So unfortunately, this is not very innocent at all, because, for example, people generally prefer to spend more time looking at information that supports their political stance. By the way, this is very difficult to, if someone is he has democratic values, it's very difficult to make him believe in Republican ideas, and vice versa. If we take this example for the United States. People who believe in pseudoscientific theories tend to ignore information that disproves those theories. Scientists often display that confirmation bias when they selectively analyze and interpret data in a way that confirms their preferred hypothesis, and this is why it is so dangerous. And the last on my list, with which I'm going to wrap up my presentation, just not to take abuse of your time. This is the so-called authority bias. This is something very interesting because it is related to human evolution, and specialists think that this is the reason why we survive, because in order to survive, human beings need to be in a group, and for a group to exist, leadership is very important. So we all need to have our leaders and to obey their authority. But as a matter of fact, we have developed this authority bias, which is the tendency to blindly follow or believe the instructions and views of a person in authority. Teachers, doctors, police all hold a place on the pedestal of society, and we tend to do what they tell us to do. For example, when a doctor tells a prime minister, a president, a king, or a queen to remove their trousers and sit on the cold table, they would most probably do so, just obeying the authority of the doctor. So my last example here represents the Major General Wenceslav Mutevchiyski, who was appointed chairman of the National Crisis Management Staff on 24th of February 2020. So there is a slight change between the picture on the left and picture on the right, because in the early COVID days in March 2020, when we all had this person opening the news and closing it with important messages on the pandemic, he was wearing his military uniform, and this definitely caused a lot of fear and even panic. This guy is still the chairman of the National Crisis Management Staff, but lately he is showing up in a more civilized outfit, as you see it to the right of the picture. So there is somebody behind the scenes who is thinking carefully of the messages, of the nonverbal messages which are going to the audience. probably they try to say that now they are in better command of the whole process and we need not to worry about it. So to wrap it up, the question is, what can we do about it? Knowing that it is all about the structure and the processes that take place in our brain. Is there really something that we can do to change this situation? This is a question that you can join us in answering, because what I'm showing you are the results of a work in progress, and we are on our way because we have another ongoing project which is focusing at trying to debias educators and learners by successful teaching strategies, and we are on our way to think about those. Thank you for your attention and for your kind invitation to join your conference. I would be very glad to answer your questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Milena. I also remember you recently had this article about conspiracy theories, some quite, I would say, exotic ones, that Finland does not exist, and about the Denver airport.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Finland,
so,
yeah.
yes. So, how do you think the social networks have been assisting in the spread of such theories or anti-vaccination sentiments and some other harmful information? Because okay, even before social networks were there, some 20 years ago, I think 90% of stuff on the internet was porn or other junk, but still, so people could go to some forums to find those thinking alike about flat Earth or whatever. But perhaps social networks, with all their advantages, also helped those people to spread their theories and even to undermine democratic processes more effectively in some countries, including some well-established democracies that we wouldn't think some 10 or 15 years ago that something like that could happen in certain Western countries, which also we perceive them, and they also like to be perceived as established democracies and strong democracies and consolidated democracies and so
on. In the course of preparing this article that you mentioned on the conspiracies, I've read lots of studies about the role of social media on the spread of conspiracy theories. And to my surprise, the data shows that actually the social media is nothing but a tool. So their role is to make the spread faster and just to broaden a little bit its scope, its reach, because it's very easy just to with the click of a button you share it and it's gone. One thing which is surprising is that the social media haven't done anything about the quality of the conspiracy theories in terms of they didn't make it more. This is almost more or less the same number of theories because some old theories were converted into theories about COVID, for example, and they didn't make it more rich in content because the very mechanism behind the conspiracy theories is very limited. Usually they follow very similar structure. They have a claim or two, and they are this is how the process is exhausted, and it is very limited. There isn't a great content variety of the conspiracy theories. So the social media is the tool, and we are not to demonize it by no means, because each tool can be used both for good ends and for bad ends. These are the people behind the tool, the people using the tool that we need to target if we are to think of policies of preventing the spread of misinformation and disinformation, definitely.
Yes, thank you. And so you mentioned that the vaccine is connected with altering the human DNA somehow, and it's an old story, just refurbished for
Absolutely.
yeah to match the COVID situation. And yes, in Armenia for several years we've had this sentiment, a similar one, not exactly about altering DNA. It was more about like, causing infertility. It was about the human papillomavirus vaccine Gardasil. But so, but these COVID vaccines, the issue about COVID vaccines being used to alter DNA on insect microchips somehow uh, continue that story, and they pushed that story, I would say, to the backstage, because in the last year almost no one remembers Gardasil, but still I can see how the old narratives were refurbished or somehow, I would say, maybe recycled and brought into the context of COVID. And also, would you see a parallel between the story of that old man who died? You said that the headlines were somehow manipulated, and stories about more recent stories already in the recent weeks or a couple of months, like about deaths related to vaccines. So they give a title that someone died after this vaccine trial, and then it turns out that the person who died got placebo, or it was totally unrelated. And it's even not just recent couple of months. I remember already last year in summer there was an issue about some Ukrainian military men who died after injecting some American vaccine. It was not still about COVID. So it already somehow the same stories continued and refurbished, recycled somehow. So do you see the parallel between such titles?
It's a very old technique of causing emotional reaction, emotional response. This is, as I mentioned in my presentation, newspaper headlines very often refer to this direct causality. They mention a fact and then they mention an outcome, and you inevitably make the link between the two, although there is no such a link, because in this particular example, after they've imposed the lockdown on this little town, everybody was shocked because such a thing has not happened for 40 or 50 years in this country. So all of a sudden people were so scared and so panicked that it was very easy to claim that someone who broke the rule by escaping the place was found that, and this is what will happen to everybody who dares to do so. There was no relation to COVID whatsoever. The guy just got drunk and he left to sleep somewhere in a forest. But this is how to say, this is an approach of media, because they need catchy headlines just to attract more attention and to attract more readers. It has nothing to do with the truth, and it has nothing to do with although both facts are true. He escaped, yes, and he was found that, yes. So it's not a matter of being true or false. It's not a fake news, but the implication that there is a relation between the two facts is something which is sort of viciously used by the editor to attract more attention, to trigger emotional reaction. So this is, as I said, old technique which is constantly in use by headlines. You open any newspaper every day and you will see plenty of cases. Of course, now the target is COVID vaccination campaign, because there are so many questions which are not answered by science yet. And this is a fruitful soil for disinformation and for manipulations of any kind. And with coming elections in our country, for example, any suitable occasion is used to show one thesis or another. For example, how the government failed to provide the needed number of vaccines, or how vaccines that they bought were not of a high quality compared to vaccines which are applied in other countries. You name it. any possible ideas are just circulating around, and everything has to be checked very carefully before we give our trust to one headline or another, which is tiresome, and people never do that.
Yes, and just one remark before I open the floor for more questions. You mentioned number of recoveries being now like in the focus of publications, and I could see a similar tendency in Armenia and in several other countries as well, including some EU members. That is indeed the case. So thank you very much, Milena, and I would invite other participants to ask questions at this stage.
Yeah, I have just a short question. What is in your opinion? Because we talk at the previous meeting about this. What is in your opinion the proper reaction from the European Union in this war to combating fake news and misinformation about this pandemic? Because I think that we should explain to the population, to our societies, that all those misinformations and all this disinformation about vaccine and about COVID-19, it's a part of the hybrid war. So what is, in your opinion, the proper way for the European Union to manage this disinformation?
Well, if you allow me, I will give you my personal opinion, not not the one of not officially of any organization.
Sure.
It's a difficult question indeed. Nobody knows the correct answer, because it will take time before we see whether any decisions will give fruits or not. One thing they are trying to do now is to, following the example of the United States after those scandals with banning Donald Trump from social media and stuff, is they try to put forward the idea that what is illegal offline should be illegal online, and to impose some censorship, but more stricter rules about the contents that social media put online, because you know that now social medias have no responsibility. You can put everything online, and it's the responsibility of the users. This is one thing they try to do officially. I don't know whether this will bring to any good ends, because it's a long path with lots of legislation involved, and this is the heavy machine. But in my personal view, what needs to be done, this is to reestablish the trust into science and scientific authorities by meaningful campaigns to bring science closer to people, because first of all, people should know that they don't have the expert opinion on vaccines, so they shouldn't be involved in such conversations, and this should not be tempting. If you need an opinion about vaccines, you should ask viral, I don't know what's the name of the virusolog, the guy who makes the vaccine, or at least a doctor, because in our country the public image of the doctor is completely ruined, because they speak on any occasion with and or without expertise. So there is no the public image of scientists, of doctors, of experts is very much ruined. So I think that there should be a general effort to put back the trust into these professions who have the expertise to decide such complex problems as the problem of whether the vaccine should save us from COVID-19 or not. It should be done by appropriate campaigns, information campaigns, by raising the awareness, by letting people know how easy it is to get tricked or to get misinformed by news and by headlines, and by interfering at the level of education. We need to introduce more teaching strategies which aim at preparing kids for this disinformation flow, so that to make them aware of how to navigate in the information sea which is surrounding us, and how to do it successfully. Because it's not a matter of saying that one thing is true and one thing is false. You know that fact checking, which we all hope that will do the job, actually did a very little job. Nowadays, everybody claims that they are fact checking, so what? My truth is not your truth. Is that right? I read my set of true facts, and you read your set of true facts, and we start fighting over what? Because nobody knows what is true in this world. Everything might be true. So this is not a question of fact checking. It is a question of shifting our attitude toward who are the experts, who are the people to know. It's like restoring how it was in the past many years, or even centuries ago. I don't know which was the period when those professions enjoyed more a better prestige, but I think this is the way to go.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. Other questions? Well, if there are no questions at this moment, I would like to ask Roger Przybylski to take the floor now. So he is the editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight, which is a very comprehensive publication on all issues related to Central and Eastern Europe, and I strongly suggest following it if you haven't done so yet. So Wojciech, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Armen. I understand it's a summary discussion of the project that we have been carrying out. But let me reflect on a few general points, and also following what Milena has been presenting on the, let's say, social psychology aspects of it. We're dealing at Visegrad Insight, of course, with a similar problem of false narratives. And these false narratives are, of course, there partly because there are certain actors who sponsor them, but also partly because there is an ongoing crisis in journalism. On one hand, I would say this ongoing crisis has been extended since 1990s, where internet has been putting a lot of hardship on quality journalism. And by quality journalism, I mean essential things like fact-checking, editorial process, review, peer review, everything that happens usually also in the newsrooms. Also, what we are experiencing all across the board, this is not only Central and Eastern Europe, this is a global phenomenon. There is a decreasing number of people who can live off journalism, and that is severely implicating or impacting democracies all around the world. And in our part of the world, especially since journalism has been a fresh start after 1989 for many of the countries we come from, and in other countries it's even more fresh start as the autocratic regimes or unfree regimes or partly free regimes were only present. That said, at the same time, there is another process that we observe. There is a global demand, and in particular countries, each national public space, a particular demand for information, for analysis, for explanation. The consumption of journalism, of quality journalism, is actually on the rise. So these are two different trends in a way that one can observe, and we see that also in Central Europe. People are not only more interested in reading news; they're more interested to commit and to pay for quality news. But these are, of course, bubbles. The whole issue of bubbles is the real problem. The social polarization that is resulting from them is the real problem. There isn't really any solution. It's a long-term investment to try to work it out and to be more and more inclusive with the bubbles you believe in, social bubbles that you believe on are of quality. Now, of the recent trends that we observe and we have seen, especially in the last year since COVID, is that there are new actors and there are potentially new scenarios for media landscapes, or what we call also information sovereignty in Central Eastern Europe. First, let me touch the new actors. We have been traditionally usually attributing disinformation processes to, especially in Central Eastern Europe, to one actor, which is Russia. But we are seeing increasingly more refined attempts to influence and misinform, to run shadow PR campaigns and advertising campaigns by actors from China. These are companies. These are also lobbyists, secret or public lobbyists of the interests of the Chinese Communist Republic of China that are operating here in the region, and they try to advance Chinese interests in what is a projection of a global struggle for power and for the hierarchy of power between the United States, China, United States, and to some extent only Russia. So China has been very present, especially after the breakout of the pandemic, and after the clash with a verbal clash with the U.S. administration, especially Donald Trump, on the sources and on the blame of mismanagement, at least of the virus. We have seen a lot of public outreach by diplomatic sources, but we also see a lot of tension building up on the question of tech companies, the type of dependency that tech companies from China have, not really to Chinese law, which is absolutely fine, but directly to the Chinese secret services and the one and only Chinese Communist Party. With this floating on the air, there is more attention. There are more examples of clashes, also related to human rights, and in a style that nobody yet attributed before to China, but has been known from Russia. That is about bullying. That is about intimidating journalists, intimidating countries. Case in point where was for a few times situation in China, where some politicians, including representative of Senate, of Czech Senate, has been since, by the way, 1989, vocal supporters and real supporters to Taiwan's independence, autonomy. And in the recent months, the tensions again went high up as the Speaker of the Senate went to Taiwan to represent Czech state and sign a trade deal recognizes Taiwan's sovereignty in that domain. China reacted furiously. We have seen different verbal threats. They were not as serious as Russians, who were apparently attempting at life of some mayors, also in about the similar time. So these elements of, you wouldn't say only disinformation, but what is also starting to become a new term in town of disinformation, the so-called sharp power, shadow and open influence of non-democratic governments on not only state actors, but civil society, media, and economy, in order to block them from performing and operating in their full democratic freedoms, is really taking shape. And we start to observe it. We only start to report it in a broader context but I believe this is happening. And on the second point, as I started with the condition of journalism, this is really important, and this is even more important to follow up, because at the end of the day, no matter what information, disinformation, counter disinformation action you take, this is always in the context, and in the context is here the quality and the resilience of journalism. And the bad news there is again bad and good news of the recent 10 months of the pandemic, is that advertising market nearly collapsed. Especially, this is terrible news for the print press. Nothing gets really printed, and no advertisement is going for print press, which was the backbone, at least for the local journalism. And local journalism gives this decentralized, this fabric of democracy in every country, and hence it is undermining the democratic information sovereignty of countries, where societies cannot be fully in control of the information and therefore make informed decisions. On the other hand, the good news of the recent months are subscription rates. Online subscription that was not even a considered model for journalism in the midst of the financial crisis 2008 has become already very much driven by Netflix, a new business model, and a hope for journalism. And we indeed see across the board, wherever journalism is having some subscription model, it is usually smartly done, successful, and subscription rates for many of the outlets across the world, but also in Central Europe. And there is a fantastic example from Slovakia, Denniken, are only rising. And they are rising rapidly, very efficiently, driving the subscription rates for Denniken from 0 5 years ago to 64,000 subscribers. In case of Gazeta Wyborcza, the main daily in Poland, liberal, critical towards the government, recently reaching 250,000 subscribers. So in a way, that's good news. As I told you at the very beginning, our perspective in researching the field of disinformation is focusing on this information sovereignty, and it's measured by the question of how many journalists can live off the profession freely and without compromising their integrity. And on this note, I would end, because I think the ball is in the air and we will only see. But there are some premises to be optimistic, and ultimately to think that with this crisis, it's not for sure. It is not said that journalism might not be even better off later on. With journalism better off, this is the best way to defend democratic information security, simply speaking.
Yeah, thank you, Wojciech. Considering subscriptions, do you know the story of the new Hungarian outlet, Telex? I think it was even launched with crowdfunding, if I'm not mistaken.
Crowdfunding indeed is one form to how to start a business, media business. And I spoke to the publisher and to the editor-in-chief, Vera, not long ago. Despite pandemic, I'm traveling from time to time, been to Budapest. And they are, after a very successful crowdfunding campaign, I think in a matter of months or two, they reach €1 million easily. They continue to crowdfund. So they had a very good start. They created an investment fund in a way to jumpstart their organizations. And the next thing they do is they want to convert their free readership into subscribed readership, perhaps with no payment initially, but at the end of the day to make it individual regular contributions. Because yes, as I mentioned, the small contributions that are they cost less than espresso a month or whatever other drink someone prepares are in fact life-saving for the information space in every country, in every national public space.
Yeah, thank you. And considering China, yes, I've also even started writing about that issue, Russian and both Russian and Chinese propaganda since March or April last year. And also, I noticed how it worked, such level that some governments were persuaded not to impose travel bans early enough. Well, that was also perhaps miscalculation by the World Health Organization, who's had in just beginning of February last year said the widespread travel bans were not needed. But in some European countries, I believe there was this issue that governments were afraid of losing revenues from Chinese tourism. Well, it ended up in losing much more, not only in money, but different aspects. And indeed, I think this new spin by China and some perhaps mainstream Western media joined that campaign, maybe not they wished to do so, but it coincided with the anti-Trump agenda at some point. And well, and I open now a Reuters article from the 3rd of February last year, actually, when WHO chief told there is no need to unnecessarily interfere with international travel and trade, meaning specifically ban of travel to China. And actually, the title, I may put the link in chat, and the title is WHO chief says widespread travel bans not needed to beat China virus. So it goes through China virus at the moment, and then some political considerations pushed to create a new name. Even there was this issue that Taiwan's early warning about the spread of virus in China was not taken seriously, and so it's a whole field to study, I think, how it works. And yes, I remember those stories about Czech politicians, including the mayor of Prague, Grzyb, I believe. So, any other questions or comments?
I rather have a comment with regards to journalists. As someone who was working in the field for 3 years prior to my current position, I share your thoughts and understand it very well. But I think one important thing to mention here is that there is a certain blame to be put on those who are responsible for the PR, for the government agencies and other government structures. What do I mean by that? Sometimes, and sometimes even usually, they are not cooperating well with the journalists. Rather, they try to defend their agencies and their structures so hard and so much not to allow their own workers to speak with journalists and provide information that is really hard to translate to the human language and to understand what do they mean by that. So they in a way build this fortress that all around us are enemies, and we here are in safe space, and we know the way how we should act. We know the better, so no one can actually criticize us. And this does not facilitate the cooperation at all. It actually makes it way harder. So I do believe there's a part to be, there is a partially, we can partially blame those people who are responsible for this PR, so to speak.
Should I respond here? I don't know. Yeah. I just finished writing a piece for another project, and there is a growing number of research. We were also part of in another project on the question of, yes, PR agencies and let's say the business of disinformation. And I think this was the headline of one Financial Times article. The new trends that comes into looking at, sorry if that doesn't answer directly your comment or question, Artus, but when you mention the PR activity, this is indeed a growing business all across the board, and again, everywhere. Having many journalists, by the way, recruited for this business, previously journalists, so they know how to operate media if you want to earn better money. And unfortunately, the Janus phase of disinformation, with all the psychology, with all the narratives, with all the technology also of trolling, robot trolling behind it, the Janus phase of it is money. You earn money on disinformation, and PR agencies are specializing by now, or in Poland as well, in Czechia as well, on spreading disinformation for money, and not only because some clients are paying for it. Spreading disinformation and spreading conspiracy theory can pay off very well. A Czech portal, Conspiratory.sk, is earning, the estimate is €8,000 monthly by spreading conspiracy theories in Czechia. Global Disinformation Net Index estimated that now I think it's so Conspiratory earns 7,000 a month. Global Disinformation Index estimate that 20,000 of the websites they recognize as for sure disinformative websites around the world are generating 80,000 euro. Sorry, no, 1 million a month, something, 1.023 euro per month, which is an awfully lot of money. And that's just tip of the iceberg. Another thing that is happening related to disinformation is digital ad fraud. The type of incentives and the type of social psychology would say, response, reaction to disinformation is naturally the feeling of anxiety, anger, uncertainty, the need to feed the monster of look for more information, confirmation bias, all that. But it translates to attention that you can translate to revenues from advertisements on one hand, but also to lowered critical, let's say, abilities of navigating internet and clicking on fake links, ads like this. There are very little litigations and investigations into that. In fact, at the end of 2017, that was the only one that I remember up until then. So the first one was 2017. It was joint action by Google and FBI to break apart $300 million digital ad fraud scheme, earning money on those small payments that people didn't even know they're happening. They were extracting money from advertising budgets of big companies, putting money on digital advertising. So yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't respond directly to your question, but PR and PR business and the unethical or lack of ethical standards in this business, along with other elements of that that are relating very much to the business of the disinformation and the money behind it.
Yes, so other questions? So let's then try to summarize. Maybe Angela, would you like to step in at this moment?
Yes, thank you, Armin, for organizing the events and being the lead applicant for the event. I never thought before that we will be able to join such an initiative, and I will explain why. Because we were not were involved in initiatives that approached disinformation. I was part of a team that studied in the past how disinformation campaign were used in elections, but I never thought that I will be able to join a team that will approach disinformation during the pandemic. And for ESGA team, this was a challenge indeed. And I think that we managed to reflect on what is important during the pandemic, and we had different approaches on this crisis. And this is very important because those actors that were involved, what we monitored, what we managed to do in such a short time, it is very important for our future activities. And only a few things to say. First of all, the initiative that refers to disinformation campaigns, to the identification of the main themes, conspiracy theories, actors involved. I think these initiatives must be continued at the regional level, not only at the local and national level. Secondly, we must appreciate the true importance of political, intellectual, and civil society leadership, because these three categories of actors are very relevant for future initiatives and for future of the policy making process. If these actors make mistakes, we must draw their attention, and we must monitor their activities and to point out where they are wrong and give them the support that they need in order to avoid such mistakes in the future. Also, I think that we need to think about solutions, not only to monitor what happens at the local or regional level, and not just to appreciate the state of affairs, to appreciate how one or another political actor acted during the pandemic. This is not the most appropriate strategy from our part. I mean, from the think tankers and civil society organization. In the future, I think we could reflect on some proposals, on some common proposals that can be applied in the states that we represent, because as I mentioned in one of the previous meetings, at the beginning, I thought that we will have the most worst case scenarios in the region, but in the end, I find out that we have common challenges and we will have to overcome them together. Also, what was really important during this project, because we are summarizing our activities, it was important to explain during the pandemic the following things. What messages do public and political actors used during the pandemic? if they're intended to promote some misinformation in order to have some benefits, in order to create some windows of opportunities to achieve long-term political goals, to change the legislation in force. And we had a lot of example in this regard in the region. To encourage fear in order to gain control over society. Media literacy. This is another point that I would like to stress out as an important thing, because this is not longer just something fashionable for us, for civil society or for media experts. This is also a necessity. And this is a current necessity. And I think that in this regard, we should encourage education to be extended, I mean, regarding the media literacy, to be extended at local and regional level, where the people have access only to TV channels and not to online resources. We must encourage the cohesion between different representatives of civil society. And I have in mind here the cooperation and the cohesion between civil society organizations and media experts. But I think to this cooperation, we can ask to join the IT sector, the technical experts. They can come up with some technical solutions in order to promote the decrease of disinformation in online, and not only online space, but also to find out some technical solution for other fields. We must pay attention to the way in which religious cults, and I have in this case in mind the church, how they came closer to certain social vulnerable groups, and how they approach them, and what messages they use for disinformation as well, and what are the interests they promote. If they promote the interest of the church, if they promote the interest of their own followers, or they promote some foreign interest. In this case, I have in mind Russian Federation through the Russian Orthodox Church. Also, I would like to stress out that I think we must continue to work on monitoring how Russian Federation and other actors involved with interest in the region used this pandemic, used this crisis in order to achieve some foreign policy goals. For me, as a representative of or two countries in the region that followed some disinformation campaign in online related to the theory of conspiration, and not only. I think this is a very important and relevant thing to monitor in the future. They mobilized a lot of human resources. They mobilized a lot of financial resources to pursue their own interest, and to use this window of opportunity related to the humanitarian aid, and for vulnerable social groups. I think this field should be again monitored in not a short time, but I think in a long time. And how this humanitarian window of opportunity, how these resources are used to control political and economic process in certain regions, in certain countries. And I have in mind here also the vaccination process. And an example in this case can be Ukraine, where some political actors are promoting Sputnik 5. And those political actors are promoting not national interest of Ukraine. And in the end, I think we should engage should be engaged in a responsible way, and to appreciate correctly the role of the leadership. in management of this crisis, both at local and regional level, and also to encourage the engagement and cooperation at the international and regional level, as we did during these 6 or 8 months, in order to encourage cooperation as an essential tool to produce qualitative change in the region, because otherwise we will face a lot of disinformation campaign, and not only related to the pandemic crisis. I really appreciate our cooperation and really appreciate your engagement and your leadership, Armand, and I think that we can do great things together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. I also really appreciate your and Catalin's input. And yes, we actually, yes, media literacy, which you mentioned, we currently have a project on that, but it's an internally implemented project funded by Open Science Foundations Armenia. But hopefully in the future we can have some international projects in this field as well. And the other issues that you mentioned are also, of course, worth attention. And there will be a continuous work on that. So, Katalin, will you step in now, perhaps, with some remarks?
Yes, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you, Armen, for this opportunity to participate in this project, and also for your engagement in this analysis project. Today I will be extremely short. And I will talk shorter than the last meeting, and my intervention today will be or wants to be a conclusion about our research and analysis activity in the past a few months. And with your permission, I will try to contextualize the general issue of our activity. So I will focus on two extremely important issues, maybe three, but the last topic it's clearly tangential. So I will talk about the pandemic and the geopolitics, and also about the strategic interdependence in our region, because it is very important to understand how this interdependence works. So first of all, as I showed, and also we showed at our last meeting, the epidemiological crisis made us aware that we are actually living in a worsening crisis. So a crisis of lack of trust, a crisis of geopolitical games, in which Europe seems to have already lost the match, because our whole strategy of the continental strategy to outsource production chains has cost us extremely much. Asia, in my point of view, it's not only an economic tiger. In this case, Asia, it's a diplomatic and economic colossus that never misses an opportunity to assert its supremacy in the international system. Unfortunately, and I think this is our role as experts, as technocrats, and here I want to emphasize the word technocrat, because I strongly believe that the foreign policy analyst, and especially the domestic policy expert, must be a technocrat without ideology. So our duty is to provably assess and to provide expertise in this field, to properly assess the situation that have arisen and to draw attention to sensitive issues for the foreign policymaker, and precisely because our role is to provide expertise, as I said, concrete solution and even plans for the future. So I will make direct references to China, because this is very important for us and for our region, although it seems to be a topic of little importance for our region, maybe for Europe, but I would say the opposite. China, it's the most concrete example when it comes to diplomacy. From panda diplomacy, we came to want to talk about road diplomacy or about health diplomacy, although health diplomacy has long been the attribute of France, or although the United States has tried to gain major importance in this field. Unfortunately, China has managed to become the world leader in this moment when you talk about health diplomacy. We are more and more connected to China, and I could even say dependent. And the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that our region is undergoing a lot of geopolitical challenges. I make no secret of the fact that I'm an expert on Nordic security and cooperation, and this helped me to understand and to discover a pattern of Chinese diplomacy into European policy. From Chinese Arctic policy to measure investment of vital interest to our states and in the region, it is clear that China has become a big continental power, and is now on the verge of conquering Africa, those nullifying the United Kingdom and French political and strategic importance on the Black continent. So I will stop. I stop on this subject because I noticed in this months of pandemic a Chinese avant-garde, a huge Chinese avant-garde, both in Romania and in Moldova. For example, in Romania, China has launched an intense campaign to promote the strategic importance that the Chinese authorities and Beijing attached to Romania, to my country, actively campaign for the granting of a license to implement 5G technology in Romania. And the Romanian press report extensively on some aspects of disinformation coming to China. And in my opinion, Russia tried to counterbalance this balance of power on the continent using disinformation in equal excessive way as China and the Chinese companies. And regarding the question, what did we learn from this pandemic, or what did the authorities learn from the mistakes made in this pandemic? I think I can list a few important issues. First one, the pandemic, it's becoming a field of diplomacy and national security, and this is very, very important. In my opinion, we can speak about minefield, because the instrumentation of national diplomacy during the crisis has shown that the European commitment to unity has turned into a race for survival in the international system. Each state becomes selfish again and try to return to the traditional alliance as these alliances were before World War II. And Romania clearly went into the hands of France the public policy during the pandemic being a faithful copy of what happened in France, from the area of quarantine to the suspension of school and universities courses in an identical manner. The second issue, I think that the media war can be about the media war and misinformation. And the media war and misinformation have become weapons of geopolitical warfare. As we have shown throughout our discussions, the great powers have restored to new forms of mass communication and social media in particular to legitimize their action. But also to destabilize their opponents. Russia, United States, even China have used new forms of communication to strike decisive blows in this informatical war. We must admit that we are at war, and this war, it's a war of the multipolar world. I believe that the major failure of the European Union has been that it has failed to limit the effects of misinformation, as I said. And moreover, the European Union, through its executive apparatus, its executive bureaucrats, failed these misinformation actions previously by the Commission, and by the Commission's refusal to make contracts available for the supply of COVID vaccines. And the third issue, and I think that this is the most important issue, would be the mapping of a conflict and a geopolitical strategy. Clearly, our region has been severely affected by the coronavirus crisis. And what I can say about the way in which the Romanian authorities manage this pandemic externally are the following things. Romania has clearly reaffirmed its status as NATO and EU member country, and has strengthened its position as regional power. And Romania has looked closely at both Moldova and Ukraine, and has intervened extremely promptly in providing medical assistance. So it is true that that Romania has failed to expand its influence in the Eastern Black Sea neighborhood, but I think as an EU member state, Romania, it's part of the EU's external action plan. So in conclusion, our lives, we must admit that our lives have changed dramatically, but we have certainly learned to look at the whole geopolitical situation as a whole. Moreover, I truly believe that in the future, we will be able to talk about the European unity only in regional terms. Maybe will be this thing with we will save Europe's dominant position in the international system, and the security issue are extremely extremely difficult to explain, because the pandemic has shown us that we do not have a clear strategy for action, and certainly the regional cooperation models that exist will have to change their structure of action with a new pillar. In my opinion, this new pillar could be the health emergency pillar. Why not? Maybe in the near future we will have a new form of cooperation from the Baltic Sea to the Caucasus. But I think and truly believe that our project can be used by the policymaker and the political leaders of our country to promote the interests of our region. So thank you very much again, and I hope that we will cooperate in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, you made just several valuable points that show the underline the need for more work in this field, and certainly there is a place for cooperation in the future, and hopefully we can develop it. So, and so Alexandra, would you
Yes.
share your thoughts now?
Yeah, Kathleen, thank you so much for your presentation. Actually, I have some commentaries and some questions to you. If I understand you correctly, you before said that European Union failed on the vaccine politics, right? Or I'm incorrect understanding your thoughts. Is it right or is it not? Can you please?
No, is it right? Is it right?
Okay, then I have first of all, then how you imagine how this situation should be developed if we understand that the medical side of the European Union is not in this competency. So for instance, the medicine is not just European Union part, but the countries have its own sovereignties on this part of the European Union, and the vaccine politics they just cannot be developed as easiest as it should be because of the complexity of the countries. So, and in that case, I have some questions, which is, first of all, probably you heard about the European Medicine Agency and the European Center for Disease Prevention, and also the control, which was created in the first waves of the COVID situation and COVID pandemic. And it's actually really was working on a European level, but the hardest part of that was that most of the societies, parts, and countries never heard about it. But from the perspective of the mask and all the countries received the necessary improvements from the European Union, it was exactly this center. And I was going to ask your opinion. So if we are talking that it failed on the vaccine politics and it failed on the so much stages, then what should be improved better? And if we don't consider that there was actually an actions which we usually just didn't hear. So this was my first question. And then my second question was about, do you hear about European Union's Article 222, if I'm correct? So you was talking before about the bureaucracy. And if we're talking about European Union and exactly this article, it's about, basically it's about then when European Union countries receive some diseases, crises, and if you was mentioning before that you called coronavirus as a war, then there is an Article 222, which is providing help to the countries which receive these diseases and some problems in the countries. So what is your opinion on that? What is the problems why this article which European Union have and they should be integrated in the part, they didn't do that?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Alexandra, for your comments and for your questions. First of all, when we talk about the European Union and we talk about the problem with the vaccine strategy and the communication strategy, we talk about the lack of transparency. When the European Union assumed its role to promote the official communication about the pandemic, about the vaccination process, they should know that the people wants facts. The people in this crisis, we understand that the people don't want to be lied at the TV. And in my opinion, it is very dangerous for the European democracy that the European Commission don't want to give us, to the large public, the contracts negotiated by the Commission with the pharmaceutical companies. And this is what the European Ombudsman said. The people must know what and how the European Commission negotiate this, all those accords with the pharmaceutical companies, because in my opinion, this commission, von der Leyen Commission, failed, and it's more worse than the previous commission, and more worse than the lower commission. As you mentioned, the health public system, it's regulated by the states, and the EU treaty said very clearly at the 4th article that the disease and the pandemic disease should be regulated only by the state. But I repeat, when the European Union assumed its role as leader and said to the national government, okay, we will negotiate it for you, we will negotiate it for the Union in the name of the European unity, then we should know that you should know how to communicate, you should know how to proper assure a correct vaccination and a proper vaccination campaign, because in my opinion the vaccination campaign also failed, and I think that if the Commission will not give us more information about the contracts, then the European Parliament should make its duty, should control the Commission, and should came to in front of us, to came Mrs. von der Leyen, and ask very clearly what and how you negotiate. And by the way, I hope I answered to your question. And by the way, I'm not Eurosceptical, but I'm very realistic. I'm very realistic, and I really hope that Commission will clarify this situation, because it's in the interest of the European Union. We should clarify this, because many governments start to ask the Commission why we are not involved in this process, why you decided this. We don't know why Commission chose AstraZeneca or BioNTech vaccines, and why they don't choose, I don't know, the Sputnik 5. And the Commission should answer to all those questions, because it's in its advantage to say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alexander, will you make other points?
To the Catalan or from the Latvian?
No, just as a wrap up, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So from the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, I would like to say thank you, Armen, for your leading. It was a great opportunity and possibility to be part of the project. Also, thank you, colleagues, for a wonderful webinars together. And I think it was really interesting to see diverse approaches from different countries' perspective, and also to provide monthly bulletin articles when we analyze our country's actions. And as today we are concluding our project, and Angela and Katalin expressed great recommendations in the future what we can have, and there is really hard to add something to that, but I would like to, if Arthurs also allows me, then conclude on Latvian part, which this project, what few recommendations and few theses which we have. And I think what is more I guess noteworthy to say about Latvia is that how the whole situation developed actually, because in the first wave from the February till mostly July, the Latvian position itself, and it was a really known story as a Latvia success story to the COVID. It was on all magazines, on all articles, and there was quick actions from the government, high-level society trust, and campaigns to defend possible disinformation and conspiracy theories. And there was even a Baltic bubble created when all European countries have a lockdown. So 3 Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, had the possibility to travel between 3 countries. And on the second wave, from August till end of November, we experienced the society lack of the trust, and there was a new different restrictions with no explanations to some of the government actions, and actual disinformation started to grow up. And what we see now in the third wave from the, I guess it's almost from the December, and actually it is closely compared to, because of the vaccine, there is a complete society lack of trust. There is no trust. There is some protest which was organized before. There is a really strange and different restriction in our country, and there is no explanation from the actions of the government. And if they are, there is no reasonable and no understandable. And what is the most worst scenario is that mostly almost the, I guess, half of our society is against of the vaccination. So all this success story become in the end, which was the great beginning, they just fall down. And what I can say about that, it is great that we have this possibility as a different think tanks talk about this situation, this problem, and also this information, as think tanks are the main channel to provide information not only for the society but also to the government. And I think this is our responsibility to provide experience and provide explanation how we can deal with this situation. And yeah, that's quickly from me and my point. Maybe my colleague Arthur, do you have something to add? But I think that no. So from the Latvia part, it is a quick remark from my side. And thank you once again, Armen, and thank you, colleagues, for this project and possibility to be a part.
Thank you. And about the number of population currently not willing to get vaccinated, this 40-something seems a very popular number in several Central European countries as well, and more or less like 41, 43 in Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, something around that in Poland. In Georgia also about 40. We don't have such numbers for Armenia, so there is no sociological data like that, but seems in a lot of countries, in some Western European countries as well, this is just below half of the population, or 40-something% seem to be skeptical now.
The problem is that it's not even the usual society as the citizens. The problem is that even the medics, which usually the government says that the medics should popularize the vaccination process, but they are against that. So it is only growing the society as a general number to, and also the citizens, which is not planning to vaccinate. Yeah, Armen, you were saying before. Sorry to interrupt you a bit.
So in this case, it's yes, a bit unusual that medics are against vaccination, because it seems they should have known the story the best about variola and measles and mumps and whooping cough and a lot of other diseases, but this time seems there is more effective propaganda, and maybe this microchipping or altering the DNA stories have been working more effectively in this case, because, well, some of the vaccines, like seasonal flu vaccines, also don't give lifelong protection, but still there haven't been any sentiments like this against those. But in this case, we see that this is an unprecedented campaign globally going on, and again, some just there were fresh news today in some countries, like stop Bill Gates, like the pun Gates to hell. So, like, if you get vaccinated, you maybe dumped and go to hell sometimes. So these things are very strange, actually, and this is a phenomenon that still has to be studied. And also in the other field, in media literacy and information field, there is also work to counter it. Thank you again. And Arthur, some final remarks, maybe?
Sure. As to final remarks, I guess in a way I have to one more time stress the thing that I stressed before talking to Wojciech. Strategic communication, although may not be at the first look the most important things when it comes to disinformation and communicating with society, when it comes to indeed communicate correctly government thoughts and government plans, when it comes to persuade society that the government agency is not your foe, but actually someone was trying to help you in the first place. When it comes to fight against disinformation, this strategic communication becomes particularly important. And if you look at states that indeed are successful in fighting COVID-19, you'll see that indeed the strategic communication on behalf of the government was effective. For instance, let's say Finland. They're doing very well in fighting COVID-19. One of the reasons why is that people trust the government. Why they trust the government? Because government have very well established communication system, and strategic communication is one of the best. So this is one very important thing. Second of all, in a way, it's connected to the disinformation, but I couldn't say it's strictly connected. It's very important to always be ready and prepare for the worst case scenarios. It's in a way very painful for me to say, but Latvia here can be used as an example. During the first wave of the COVID-19 in spring, Latvia did pretty well. In terms of cases, in terms of deaths from COVID-19 per million people, Latvia was one of the best in Europe, maybe in the world. So everything was, again, in comparison, very, very good. But instead of preparing for the second wave, which was inevitable, and everyone knew this, I wouldn't go as far as to say that we did nothing, but still, so many things could have been done in order to prepare for the second wave way better. But unfortunately, unfortunately, this opportunity was not used to prepare for the second wave effectively. So the second lesson that we should be learned from this is that you always have to be ready. You always have to be prepared. Again, in a way, it doesn't connect to the disinformation in the most direct way, but it's still something that you have to bear in mind. Even in terms of disinformation as well, you always have to be prepared that someone is going to spread this information, so you have to debunk it as fast as possible. Otherwise, you may find yourself in a situation that society does not trust you at all and find the information that is indeed disinformation, find it truthful and believe in this. So you also have to be prepared to debunk it as fast as possible. So this is the two lessons that I do believe are the most important when it comes to disinformation and COVID-19. And a solution to them, I guess, improving strategic communication, as well as improving public relations and opening up. This is something that I do believe and do find very, very important. I said it to Wojciech, and I may repeat it one more time. When press secretaries that are working for the state agencies do not cooperate with journalists, rather they prefer to close up and make the fortress of their agencies, they do not help at all. In reality, they are doing quite the opposite. There is no trust, and when there is no trust, it's really hard to communicate with the society. So from my perspective, they should open up, being welcome, and not only to the journalists but the society in general. That's how I see it.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Actually, I remember that during the first wave, Latvia, along with Slovakia, had the lowest number of deaths per million people in Europe, followed by Bulgaria.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then in Bulgaria, I think it wasn't since June they already allowed some attendance at football games and some other activities. So the situation started worsening. And
well, in Latvian case,
yeah.
if you mean that all of a sudden we had no restrictions, no, wasn't the case.
I know
However,
that wasn't the case.
obviously, in a way, some restrictions weren't loosed up a bit, obviously, but I would rather go as far as to say that these restrictions that needed to be strengthened in time were not during the autumn. So, for example, especially this is in particular interesting that we had an Israel case just developing in front of our eyes in August, when they opened schools. These schools were one of the places with the coronavirus were especially fast spreading. We had this example in front of our eyes, but we basically did nothing. We, in a way, somehow started to restrict schools, if I'm not mistaken, in October. So it's quite a lot of time passed by when we started to do something when it comes to schools. And I don't mention other places. So the reaction wasn't, the reaction was slow, especially again in comparison with spring, when I guess it was 3 or 4 cases when Latvia actually implemented quite quite significant restrictions. But this time in autumn, they were not so fast, so to speak.
Yeah, in the autumn we saw that in several countries which dealt pretty well in the spring and summer, it went much worse. Hungary, the Czech Republic, in the Czech Republic, which was the first country in Europe in the spring to impose masks at public places, it went out of control in autumn, and especially in late December, early January, the highest rates in the world. So, well, in December, the government was already reluctant to impose restrictions on some entertainment and shopping centers, and there were huge crowds going for Christmas shopping. So, to be honest, in Armenia, we had this like perception in February, March that it was more like our people's way of behaving. But apparently, people get tired with such restrictions during months. Then the approach changes. And even some people who behave differently most of the time may start behaving this way. But also the important point about trust in the government, we see that in Sweden, even though their policy is not popular among other countries' governments, still their population trusts them. It's a long tradition, the same probably Nordic tradition like in Finland, trust in the government. And this may be somehow related to also, well, we see also this trust in the government playing important role in New Zealand, for example. But also some countries like Taiwan and some Asian countries which also have this social trust tradition. Well, Japan, even though recently the situation has been worsening, but Japan had quite loose restrictions, not many restrictions during most of the time, although they had this mask wearing in the streets as a tradition for years now, so that may also have played a role. So still the issue of trust is a very important one, but it depends, because in some countries the governments would say they are trusted, but they are rather popular because of some populist politics they pursue, I would say, in our country as well. So, which may be the most trusted government since independence, but very populist. So there are a lot of issues again to study and to assess as public policy options and make recommendations in this field as well. So thank you very much. So dear colleagues, I want to thank everyone once again for participation in this project, and hopefully we can continue working in this field with one sponsor or another. There has been some interest, but still on behalf of some sponsors, but careful so far, but hopefully we can develop it, and we can still have some publications in the Newsstand Europe, and some other sources may be available for that. So we may still consider doing this in the coming weeks. So thank you very much, and have a nice evening, and please stay in touch. And I hope to meet you soon, and hopefully in a few months in person as well. That sooner or later life may start going into a normal mode, because for me this new normal is totally abnormal, I should say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Armin. It was indeed a pleasure to walk with you, and thank you very much, Angela, Catalina. It's also was a very big pleasure to walk with you. Indeed, I enjoyed very much being part of this project and being here, present my thoughts and my views in part with Alexandra. I find it very interesting. So thank you very much indeed.
Yes, so yeah, indeed. So have a nice evening, and please stay in touch. We still can accomplish some work together. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.